Este es para grabar. Vale, vale.
Solo uno, ¿no?
No,
Ese es para grabar.
Este es para grabar.
Y el otro es para
Y este es para oír. Buenos días. Muchas gracias por asistir a este nuevo seminario del blog sobre, lo voy a decir en castellano, sobre sentencias relevantes del Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea. Y muchas gracias también al Instituto de Estudios Fiscales que nos acoge hoy en una sala que para mí tiene recuerdos por lo que tengo detrás, porque estaba en el viejo Instituto de Estudios Fiscales donde celebrábamos oposiciones en el siglo pasado. Hoy tenemos el placer de presentar a la profesora Catarina Das-Clover, que es, a pesar de su juventud, pues tiene ya un currículum extenso. Es licenciada por la Universidad de Viena, también tiene un máster en la Universidad de Viena. Está elaborando en estos momentos sus estudios, su tesis doctoral. Tiene ya publicadas casi 30 obras en materia tributaria y también tiene unas cuantas ponencias en congresos nacionales e internacionales. Nos va a hablar de una sentencia del Tribunal de Justicia de septiembre del año 2011, precisamente de una cuestión planteada frente a la Hacienda alemana sobre un asunto sobre el cual yo en alguna ocasión he tenido oportunidad de ver sentencias del Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea y que se refiere a la discriminación o no discriminación entre residentes y no residentes, residentes de un Estado de la Unión y no residentes de ese Estado de la Unión. En un repertorio de jurisprudencia, de alguna jurisprudencia del Tribunal que aparece en el blog, por cierto, pues se recogía unas que tratan del principio que vamos a ver hoy, que es que bajo ciertas circunstancias el Tribunal de Justicia considera que son justificadas las discriminaciones entre residentes y no residentes, bajo ciertas circunstancias. En definitiva, no es más que la traslación de otro principio que ha sentado nuestro Tribunal Constitucional, basado en el principio de igualdad que establece nuestra Constitución, la que dice que tiene un aspecto positivo: todos los iguales tienen que ser tratados iguales, y un aspecto negativo: los desiguales tienen que ser tratados desiguales. La sentencia que nos van a comentar, les tengo que decir sinceramente que no me gusta. Me gusta el principio sí que está bien. Luego, lo que pasa es que luego los razonamientos que utiliza para aplicar el principio no me terminan de convencer. No creo yo que exista la desigualdad en los casos que plantea, para terminar diciendo que la norma alemana es correcta, como nos van a comentar. Por último, ya solamente llamarle la atención sobre una cosa. El asunto que se jugaba son 600 euros, con las reglas de nuestra jurisdicción contencioso administrativa no hubiera pasado de la esquina. Por 600 euros ha habido una señora y su marido que han terminado yendo al Tribunal de Justicia y han logrado que una sala del Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea, la cuarta, pues dicte una sentencia que ahora nos van a comentar con detalle. Y nada más. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Buenos días, señoras y señores. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Herrera and Professor De Cerrito, for giving me the opportunity to take part in the seminar. It really is a pleasure for me to participate here and to be here. Thank you. As you see, as you've already heard, I come from the Institute for Tax Law from the University for Economics and Business Administration, and that's why the case I'm going to present you is on direct tax law. It's the case Schulz-Stelzers versus the tax office of Stuttgart 3, which was decided upon by the court rather recently in September 2011. Well, before really getting started, I want to give you a short overview of how the structure of my presentation is going to look like, so that you all know what to expect in the next 30 minutes or so. So first of all, of course, I will give you the facts of the case and also the legal background, so that you all know what you're dealing with. And then, of course, I will present to you the issue that was put before the court. And after that, I will already present to you the judgment of the court and describe what the court said. When doing so, I will follow the pattern that the court usually follows when deciding on the fundamental freedoms. So I will start the scope of which fundamental freedoms the court thought was applicable. And after that, the court usually decides whether there is a discrimination or not. And then he looks for a justification and does a proportionality test. And I will also follow this pattern. Well, and after you know what the court has said, I will also give you my own thoughts of the case and also tell you whether I think the court was right or not. Well, that will be it, and we can already get started. So here on the right top of the slide, you see a teacher. This is Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers. I know that at first sight you won't really realize that it's a female teacher, but it was the best picture of a teacher I could get, so just imagine that's Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers. And Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers resides in Germany together with her family, and she's also working at a school in Germany. But this school she's working at is the French school in Germany. And that's why her salary is paid by a German public body. That's a by a legal person. And this French public body pays her the salary that it usually does when paying salary to teachers that are resident in France and that are teaching at the French school in France. But in addition, Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers also is paid an allowance. This allowance the aim of this allowance is to compensate her for the loss of purchasing power that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers suffers because she's not staying in France but has to go to Germany. So the aim is to place Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers in the same circumstances as residents of Germany. In detail, the two allowances that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers receives are the so-called ESYL allowance, which is meant in order to take into account the local living conditions in Germany, and the so-called family supplement, which is meant to take into account the supplementary costs relating to raising children abroad and not in France. So, well, this is the facts of the case, and now we already come to the difficult legal situation that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers found herself within. I will just start with the double tax treaty between France and Germany. According to Article 14 of this double tax treaty, salaries, wages and similar remuneration that are paid by one contracting state or a public corporation of that state to individuals who are residents of the other state shall be taxable only in the first mentioned state. France had the taxing right on the remunerations, so on the salary and the allowances that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers was receiving. And according to Article 20 of the double tax treaty between France and Germany, Germany had to exclude this remuneration of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers from its tax base. However, it was allowed to take it into account when determining the tax rate, and Germany also did so. So, in short, France had the taxing right on those salaries and allowances, and Germany exempted them and also applied the progression proviso to these payments. Just on a short side note, a legal situation like this is not at all unusual, because this Article 14 of the Double Tax Treaty corresponds more or less to Article 19 of the OECD Model Convention, and therefore a situation like this, when somebody gets paid money from a public body in the other country, could arise everywhere in the European Union or even outside of the European Union. So just that everybody knows that the court really had to rule on something quite common. So this was the double tax treaty law background, and now I already come to the legal background in German income tax law, because German tax law was the one that was contested by Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers. Well, according to Section 1, Paragraph 1 of the German income tax law, all natural persons who are resident in Germany are subject to unlimited tax liability there, just as is the case in, I think it's usual in every country of the European Union. However, according to Section 1, Paragraph 2, also other people were subject to unlimited tax liability in Germany, namely those persons who were of German nationality and who were not resident in Germany, but who were linked by a contract of employment to a German legal person governed by public law, and who therefore received a salary from a public body in Germany. So this was the inverse situation to Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer's situation. Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer's situation being Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer's coming from France and working in Germany and receiving money from a French public body, the inverse situation being a German person moving out from Germany and getting paid money from a German public body. And for exactly this inverse situation, there was a special provision in German tax law that said that the earnings of employees who are employed by a German legal person it said that persons in this inverse situation who receive a salary paid by a public body in Germany shall be exempt from tax where those earnings are for an activity abroad and exceed the remuneration to which the employee would be entitled for an equivalent activity at the location of the public body of payment. So that's exactly these allowances that the German people going abroad get paid, because those are the payments that exceed the normal payments that are paid by this public body in Germany. Germany had this rule for these allowances, and the difference was that there an exemption applied for these allowance payments, but there was no progression proviso for these German allowances. And therefore, the issue that was put before the court was whether it created a discrimination or restriction of the fundamental freedoms if allowances that are paid from a French legal person governed by public law to French citizens who are resident in Germany, if those allowances are exempted because of the double tax treaty,
but are subject to a progression proviso, whereas allowances from German legal persons governed by public law that are paid to German citizens resident in France are also exempted because of this section 3 number 64, and are also not considered when calculating the tax base. So the difference between these two situations being that in the situation of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers, these allowances are considered when calculating the tax rate, whereas in the inverse situations, in the inverse situation, these payments are not considered when calculating the tax rate. And that's why the tax rate of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers could be higher than that of the corresponding person in the inverse situation. Well, so now you know all about the legal background, and I will already come to what the court told and what the court thought about this case. And as I've told you before, I will just start, I will follow the pattern that the court usually does when deciding on the fundamental freedoms. And the court usually starts with the scope. And the question now was whether the freedom of movement of workers could be applied to this case. Because Germany argued that no, it was not the freedom of movement of workers that had to be applied, but the prohibition of all discrimination on grounds of nationality and the right of every citizen of the Union to move and reside freely within the territory of the member states. So what did Germany argue? Germany argued that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers had moved to Germany for private reasons, because she married a man who was living in Germany, and she wanted to live with him, and that's why she came to Germany. And only after already having moved there, she took this job at the French public school in Germany. And now she lived in Germany and worked in Germany, so there was also no cross-border movement when going to work every day. So she was not a frontier worker. And that's why Germany argued there is no work-related cross-border movement and never has been. And that's why Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer's situation falls not under the free movement, doesn't fall under the free movement of workers. The court had an argument against that, and I think this was a very convincing argument. He said, well, just look at the wording of Article 45 of the Freedom of Movement of Workers, because this provision, according to this provision, the freedom of movement of workers shall entail the abolition of any discrimination based on nationality. And well, what is this case all about? It's about whether the situation of a French worker in Germany is discriminated against the situation of a German worker. And that's why it's all about the discrimination of nationality of the French or maybe any other country against German workers. And that's why the freedom of movement of workers has to be applied. Even if there wouldn't have been any cross-border movement at all, this would be the case, I think. And now we come to the very difficult question whether there has been a discrimination. Well, what did the court say? The court started with looking for a pair of comparison between the internal situation and the cross-border situation, because as you all know, ECG, the fundamental freedoms, are against any discrimination of the cross-border movement against the purely internal movement. Movement against the purely internal case. And now the court said, well, I can't find an internal situation because this section 3, number 64, that was contested by Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers, just doesn't apply in the internal situation, as these allowances are only granted in the cross-border situation and not in the internal situation. And that's why this section 3, number 64, only grants a tax advantage to workers going abroad, but not to workers staying in Germany. So there is no pair of comparison. And no disadvantage in the cross-border situation in comparison to the internal situation. And then the court went on to say, well, I can make a comparison of two cross-border situations, namely of the inbound situation, being that of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers, getting the income paid from foreign sources for her work done in Germany, then section 3, number 64 would be not applicable, versus the inverse situation, the outbound situation, where the income is paid from Germany to the people for work done abroad. And then section 364 would be applicable. And this is what the court now considered. First, he looked at the outbound situation, so the inverse situation to Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers, and he said the aim of the allowances granted by Germany is to grant the recipient the same living conditions as enjoyed by him in Germany. That's why, from the perspective of German tax law, there is no enhancement of the taxpayer's ability to pay tax. And that's why Germany is right if it doesn't take into account these allowances when determining the tax rate. After that, the court looked at the inbound situation, the situation of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers, and said, well, the aim of the allowances granted by France is to grant the recipient the same living conditions as enjoyed by him in France, and to adjust this remuneration to the cost of living in Germany. And that's why, from the German perspective of tax law, there is an enhancement of the taxpayer's ability to pay tax. That's why it's a different situation to the outbound situation. And therefore, the allowances can be taken into account in the determination of the tax rate. Well, that's what the court said. And so, in the end, he said there is no restriction, and this section 3, number 64, is perfectly in line with the fundamental freedoms. Further considerations that the court did were that the German tax law didn't have to take into account the perspective of French law. So the aim of the French provisions and the aim of the French allowances to take into account the living conditions in Germany and so on were irrelevant for Germany, and that's why it could take into account these payments for the tax rate. The second consideration that the court did was that the disadvantageous treatment that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers may have suffered because of this section 3, number 64, or because this section 3, number 64 was not applied to her, was to be seen as a consequence of the disparities between unharmonized tax systems. And as you all know, a disparity is something that happens because of the different tax systems of the member states, and it's permanent saying of the court that the treaty offers no guarantee to the citizens that transferring the activities to another country and therefore to another tax system is neutral as regards his taxation. Well, this was what the court says. And I don't know what you think, but I think different from the court, and that's why I will now give you my own thoughts on this case. I think that the court, so at first, the first thing I want to say is that I think, yes, the court is right when he says it's only the German tax system that should be taken into account. Now, if you have a look at this section 3, number 64, it says that allowances paid by a public body in Germany shall be exempt from tax. And this section applies regardless whether the worker has unlimited or limited tax liability. That's why at first sight you could say, well, there is no discrimination, because this means this section 3, number 64 applies regardless whether the person is a German or a non-German citizen. And it also applies regardless whether he's a resident or a non-resident in Germany. I've put the second line in brackets because usually this section will not apply it when the person is non-resident, is resident in Germany, because then we have this internal situation. But just for that, it's complete. But the question is, can there be seen maybe an indirect discrimination because of this criterion that the allowances have to be paid by a public body in Germany, not from a public body anywhere else, in this case in France? Because, of course, it will usually be persons of French nationality who are paid by a public body in France. It will not be German people of German nationality who are paid by a public body in France. And now I've made some thoughts, which I will explain to you right now. Just imagine the situation. It's in fact the inverse situation that I told you about before, of a German national who is working for a German public body in another member state and receiving allowances. In this case, section 3, number 64 will apply, and these allowances will be exempted from the tax base in Germany and also not be considered when calculating the tax rate. In the second situation, there is a person, a French national, who is also working in this third member state. However, and he is paid by a French public body. However, he is resident in Germany. So I think that he is working maybe on the border between Germany and this other state. And that's why he is resident in Germany but works in this other state, so he's a frontier worker, so to speak. In this case, this person will also get allowances from France, and being a resident of Germany, he will be under unlimited tax liability in Germany. However, these allowances, this section 3, number 64, will not apply to his or her allowances. I think from the perspective of the person who is working in the other member state, it's a perfectly comparable situation, but there is a disadvantageous treatment, and that's why this would be a restriction. However, of course, if you consider whether there's a restriction, you always have to consider the double tax treaty law as well, because that's also part of the national tax order. When I do this in the first case, we have the same situation between Germany and the other country. Germany has the taxing right. The allowances are not taxed in Germany, and they are also not taken into account in the tax rate. Now, if I think that these double tax treaties between Germany and the third country correspond to the OECD Model Convention, between Germany and the other country, probably Article 15 would have to be applied. Article 15 being the article for employment income. Now, according to this Article 15, the other country, the working state, would have the taxing right, and Germany would usually exempt and apply the progression proviso. Now, in this other, just imagine that this other country has the same tax provisions as Germany. Then, in the other country, these allowances would be taxed, fully taxed, because they come from a French public body, not from a public body in the other country. And Germany would apply the progression proviso. So here you clearly have a disadvantageous treatment in the cross-border situation once again. And in addition to this, but that's only a side note, in this case there would even be a double taxation problem, which of course is not a problem for the fundamental freedoms, as the court has consistently ruled. But there would be double taxation because France, according to Article 19 of the OECD Model Convention, would also have a taxing right. And there's no double taxation treaty, and the double taxation treaty between France and this other country would not apply, and that's why both the other country and France would have the taxing right and tax these allowances. Well, so it clearly is a discrimination from my point of view. So the first situation you see here is the same as the second situation on the slide before, so just that you know that. And now I wonder if this second situation is comparable to the first situation, being a Germany going abroad. I wonder why this third situation, being the situation of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers, who is living and working in Germany and being paid by a French public body for her work in Germany, should be different from this second situation. And it's also comparable. And if the second and the first situation are comparable, and the second and the third situation are comparable, then I think that the first and the second situations should be comparable too. And I come to the conclusion that Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer's situation is comparable to the inverse situation, and that's why you have a discrimination of French nationals against German national workers there. Well, now to the remark of the court that this disadvantageous treatment of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers was in reality to be attributed to a disparity of the tax systems. What is the concept of disparity? The concept of disparity is that the disadvantage as compared to the internal situation would disappear in the hypothetical case of identity of both tax systems. Well, the amazing thing is that in fact France had the perfectly identical tax rule in its own tax order, and the disadvantage did not disappear there. And I think also the thoughts that I did before with the flags, they also showed that if the other country has the perfectly identical rules, there is a disadvantage. So I say there is no disparity. What I think, however, made the court come to the conclusion that there is a disparity is that he just thought, well, I can't use this disparity concept there, as the court himself said, there is no internal situation, and that's why, well, I can't. There is no discrimination. There is a discrimination. There is no discrimination, the court said, and that's why there is no need to apply this disparity concept. Well, and when there's no discrimination, everything else is a disparity. I have the problem that I don't think that there is no internal situation that this situation of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers could be compared to. Because it all just depends on the perspective you take. I think it's obvious that there is a comparable situation, or that the cross-border situation is not comparable to the internal situation as regards purchase power. And that's why when two situations are not comparable, the state has to do something to make them comparable, of course. And that's what both Germany and also France did. They granted an allowance in the cross-border situation. And thus, they made the internal situation comparable to the cross-border situation as regards purchase power. However, only as regards purchase power, not as regards the ability to pay tax. And I think that purchase power is something less than the ability to pay tax. Purchase power is that what remains after already being taxed. So, what these allowances do is to put cross-border working persons in the same situations as people who are already taxed in the internal situation. And that's why taxing these allowances would be to treat the same situation differently. And that's why this would be a discrimination. Now, of course, the court says, well, Germany doesn't have to take into account this aim of the French payments. Mrs. Schulz-Stelzers is getting these payments. Germany doesn't have to care why these payments are made. It's just a payment because of their job, and Germany can tax it or can take it into account when applying the progression proviso. However, I think that this declaration of the court is not in line with its earlier case law. Because there, for example, in the case Junt, the court has clearly decided that the aim of payments from another state have to be taken into account by the other state. Junt was also about a university teacher. It was also about a university teacher in Germany. And this university teacher taught at the university in Luxembourg, and he got expense allowances for his teaching. So he was compensated for his expenses for working there. If he would have worked at the German university, these expenses would have been exempted from the tax base and also from the tax rate in Germany, also because of a number of these Section 3, by the way. And but because he was working at the Luxembourg University, this was not the case. And in this case, the court said, well, Germany, you have to take into account that the aim of the French expense of the Luxembourg allowances is the same as that of the German expense allowances, and that's why you also have to apply this exemption that you have in your tax law for them. And now I wonder if Germany has to take into account the aim of these expense allowances. Why shouldn't this be also the case for these family allowances and these purchase power allowances? So once again, there is a different treatment of comparable situations that accounts to a discrimination. So, and I already come to the last slide of my own thoughts. When I come to the conclusion that there is a discrimination, of course, I also have to consider whether there would be any justification, so that in the end the tax law of Germany would be in line with the fundamental freedoms nevertheless. And, well, I thought that maybe Germany would argue that that the organization of the education system is still a competence of the member states, and that's why this was all okay, because the financing is also part of this competence. However, I mean, it's right that this competence is still with the member states. However, also this competence must be exercised in accordance with the freedoms. And in addition to that, this Section 3, number 68, does not only refer to teaching activities, but refers to any activities that people that are doing an activity and paid for by this public body yes, it just refers to any activities, and that's why the competence of the member states to organize the education system just is not a valid justification ground. The second justification that Germany would probably make is the cohesion or coherence of the tax system, because that's a justification that's put forward by the states nearly in every case. But so maybe Germany would argue that it's only giving the tax advantage to those persons working for German public institutions, because if it would tax these allowances, then a higher allowance would be necessary, and that's why it's somehow linked together. But up to now, the court has been very, very restrictive when accepting this justification ground. He only accepts it when there's a direct link between a tax advantage and a particular tax burden, and there can be found no link in this case, and that's why this justification would also not be accepted by the court, I think. And so I think there's no other justification that could be put forward by Germany, and that's why the restriction would remain. German tax law is not in line with the fundamental freedoms, according to my opinion. Well, that were my thoughts. I'm really looking forward to have a very fruitful discussion with you now, and I'm looking forward also to your questions. Thank you very much for your attention, and once again, it was a great pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Visita Clover. Bueno, ya han podido ver las justificaciones que dio el tribunal para decidir que en este caso no se producía una discriminación. No sé si han tenido la curiosidad de mirarse la sentencia. Yo, mientras estaba hablando, he hecho los cálculos de las cifras que aparecen ahí, y resulta que esta señora, uno de los años, había recibido en total unas bonificaciones o unas ayudas de 570 y tantos euros, y como consecuencia de eso pues había tenido que pagar, eso estaba exento de impuestos, pero sin embargo al tomar en cuenta para la progresividad del impuesto terminó pagando 600 y pico euros. Yo hubiera renunciado a estas ayudas, hubiera dicho, yo no las quiero, termino pagando menos impuestos. Bueno, ya decía que a mí no me termina de convencer la sentencia. A ver qué opinan ustedes.
First of all, congratulations for this well-structured and inspiring presentation. And I totally agree with you. I think the situations are comparable, and probably there is a covered discrimination because, of course, German public bodies are more usually going to pay German civil servants and not French civil servants. But even if there were no hidden or covered discrimination, at least there will be a restriction. And as you have perfectly explained, there is no justification for a possible restriction. But now, my questions. Well, first of all, you mentioned before the seminar that your PhD deals with a comparison of case law of the court regarding social security and direct tax law. And I wonder if there is some similar judgment regarding social security. And a broader question, do you think this judgment is totally isolated, or there is some similar judgments there are other judgments which go in the same direction. Well, that is the first question. And another question, because I think the problems, well, I must say, I totally agree with you, but perhaps the court has thought the following. I think the problem of Frau Schulz-Delzer comes because she decides to be jointly taxed with his husband, because actually she did not perceive tax income in Germany. But of course, if he is jointly taxed with his husband, then the tax rate increases and it has an influence on the tax base of the husband. I don't know, the court does not elaborate on this, but I wonder if the court has this in mind, in the sense, okay, he could have chosen not to be jointly taxed, and then he would not have been, there wouldn't been any discrimination. But on the other hand, I don't think this reasoning is right, because of course it could be, even if Frau Schulz-Delzer didn't have decided to be jointly taxed, it wouldn't be strange that she could have another sources of income in Germany, and in this case there would be a discrimination. And of course the court should not decide. The court has before its eyes a specific case, but it has to judge if the German rule is compatible as such with EC law, and I think in any case there is a discrimination. Sorry for the long questions.
Thank you very much. First, I start with your last question. You're right. I didn't mention that in this case the progression proviso would not have come into effect if Mr. Schulz-Delzer and Mrs. Schulz-Delzer wouldn't have opted for this joint tax assessment of Mr. Schulz-Delzer. Because in the specific case, Mrs. Schulz-Delzer didn't have any income other than that paid from France. And that's why, if there wouldn't have been this option, there would have been no reason for Germany to apply this progression proviso. However, I think that it doesn't matter why this progression proviso comes into place. I think we are thinking along the same lines here, and I think that also the court does not make a difference here, because this argument that you mentioned here, this was in fact mentioned by the Advocate General, because the Advocate General said, well, Mr. and Mrs. Schulz-Delzer they didn't have to opt for this joint tax assessment, and so it's their own fault, so to speak, if this progression proviso comes into effect. And the court didn't mention this argument, and that's why I think he doesn't hold it valid, and that's his right to do so, I think. The second question. Yes, I know. The second question, I will just stick with the second. The second question was about another case of the court, which would point into the same direction. I think, yes, in fact, I can think of like three cases. First, the case Junt that I already mentioned for the aim of the allowances. I won't elaborate further on it right now because I've already told you about it. I think that just recently there was a case before the court that would point into the direction that I think. That's the case Petersen. I think it was just ruled upon like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was also about a German rule. And there was an exemption for salaries that were paid to people working abroad if there was no tax treaty within the state between Germany and the state where this person was working. And in this case, Mr. Petersen worked in Germany and lived in Germany, was subject to unlimited tax liability there, and but he worked for an employer in, I think it was Luxembourg or the Netherlands, I don't really know now. And because his employer was in the Netherlands and not in Germany, and Mr. Peterson was now working for this employer in the Netherlands in a third country. And because his employer was in the Netherlands and not in Germany, this exemption didn't apply. And there the court said, well, this is a discrimination. And I think this is more or less the same. The public body is in France and not in Germany, and that's why the exemption doesn't apply. And also I want to mention that the court himself, in his judgment on Mr. and Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer, said that he doesn't refer to the situation when a person is living in Germany, goes to a third state, and is paid by France. So he said more or less that, well, maybe there could be a discrimination. But as I told you before, if in this situation there is a discrimination, then why shouldn't it be in the situation of Mrs. Schulz-Stelzer's? And the third case I can think of is the case Deutsche Shell. Deutsche Shell being the one because Germany didn't take into account currency losses of a permanent establishment in the other state. And there was also the argument, well, there is no comparable situation in the internal situation, because when there is a permanent establishment within Germany, there are no currency losses, and that's why Germany would not have to. Oh no, there are currency losses. No, it's the currency losses. The currency losses couldn't be taken into account in the other state, because this permanent establishment wouldn't have currency losses if it were from a now the right words don't come to my mind. If there was an enterprise in the other state with a permanent establishment there would be the other state wouldn't have to take into account currency losses, because there wouldn't be any currency losses. And that's why the court said, well, Germany has to take into account those losses, as it is the only country that can do so. And there you had the exact same situation. You had an internal case where there couldn't be a discrimination. The problem only did arise in the cross-border situation, and that's why Germany had to make another provision there just for the cross-border situation, even if there couldn't be found a comparable internal situation. And I think that's exactly the same as in this case here. Now to the last question with social security law. I'm afraid I can't think of a case that's similar to this one, just because there are no exemptions and no progression provisos in social security law.
Thank you. ¿Alguna cosa más? ¿Alguien desea preguntar alguna cosa? Nos hemos quedado todos encantados de la vida. Ya le digo que para perder 600 euros hay que ahorrar 570 y tantos, no está mal. Bueno, thank you, Mrs. Tax-Clover. Muchas gracias por su asistencia y les emplazamos para la nueva sesión del curso, que será el 11 de abril. El 11 de abril. El 11 de abril, que vamos a hablar de los sujetos pasivos del impuesto sobre sociedades, si no me equivoco. Vale, muchas gracias. Buenos días.